for this press conference is as follows. The Premier will make a statement, and after the statement, you, members of the press corps, or for that matter, anyone else, you are free to ask a question, and we're kindly asking you, please, to state your name and the organization which you represent. There's good reason for this. Just in case we have to give additional information, the Premier chooses to give additional information, he can identify you and know who to send the information to. Before we start, let me recognize the presence of the members of Cabinet. Welcome. The Deputy Premier, Honorable Eric Evelyn, Honorable Brand, and also, of course, members of the press corps. We do welcome each and every one of you. Ladies and gentlemen, join me please in welcoming to the podium the Honorable Premier Mark A.G. Brantley.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here for what is the second in this series of press briefings as promised, and I hope that we are living up to our promise in that regard. I want to, of course, recognize the presence of the members of Cabinet, particularly our Deputy Premier, the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, Minister Eric Evelyn, Minister Spencer Brand, Minister Troy, Youthant Troy Libert, and, of course, our Cabinet Secretary and Senior Advisor, Mr. Stedman Truss. I also want to recognize the presence of our prominent secretaries and members of the media and to say welcome. Now, where do I start? Clearly, I must start with yesterday because I believe that we all had a fantastic time at the new facility, which is the Mondo Track, as we call it, that we've been talking about for a very long time. I feel very, very proud, and I think all of Nevis should be proud, government and opposition alike, that we have been able to deliver such a facility for the people of Nevis, for the youth, but for all of us, even older people like myself. And one of the comments I made yesterday is that I was very pleased when an older person, older than me, a female, said to me that she had taken her morning walk and had decided to go to the track, and not to run the track, but to walk the track. And it says to me that all of us have seen the benefit of that particular facility. We do not have the numbers in yet. I did say at my last press conference that I expected 10,000 people to be there. It looked to me like it was a bit more than 10,000, but I hope the press will not ask me how I came up with those numbers, because this perhaps is just in my mind. But the truth is, I think we had a wonderful time. I want to, of course, commend the champions, and we had joint champions yesterday as it emerged. The Charlestown Primary School, congratulations to them, and the Joyston Libert Primary School, congratulations to them. And of course, the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School continues to dominate in the B division, and I say congrats to them as well. But indeed, congratulations to all of the schools and all of the students. I think they ran their hearts out. I think they gave the very best. It was competitive, and we all enjoyed it immensely. I want to especially recognize the troika of ministers, being Minister Eric Evelyn, our Minister of Sport, Minister Spencer Brand, our Minister of Works, and Minister Troy Libert, our Junior Minister in the Ministry of Education, because the Cabinet had mandated these three individuals to lead the process to ensure that we were ready for the inter-primary. And I believe that they delivered, and delivered well. I am particularly impressed because, of course, Ministers Brand and Eric Evelyn are brand new ministers, and for them to have taken on this task so early in their tenure and delivered in such a way, I believe it augurs well for future performance from these individuals. You know, there's a saying in Neves that performance matters. I like to say good performance matters, and this was excellent performance from them, and I appreciate them very much and thank them for all that they've done. So to all, to the patrons, I want to also recognize the members of the police and security forces. They did an extraordinary job yesterday. I want to thank them for their patience, because as we all know, the sports went longer than all of us had anticipated, but the police were in full control of the situation, and they allowed us to finish the sport day, and I thank them for that, because of course there was a point when I think there was some suggestion that we would have had to have ended it early without a champion having been determined, and I thought that that might not have been the best result. So I thank the police for their perseverance, I thank them for their patience, and I'm happy to report that they're saying that the sports was incident-free, and we had no difficulty. So despite the thousands that were there, our people were well behaved, and the police presence, supported as they were by the Army, I think that it went extremely well. And so I want to thank the High Command who are here and the rank and file of the St. Christopher Nevis Police Force for an extraordinary effort yesterday in keeping us all safe. Our Nevision public is a very critical public, so I'm pretty sure as we go into the days and weeks, we are going to hear various things. I had one particular caller who said to me that I needed to fix the situation because they didn't want joint champions. Well, I don't know how I fix that. If that's what the officials say, that that's what it is. I would want to just remind the public that the government is not involved in the business of scoring. That is for officials who are there. But I'm, as I said, very pleased with the results. And if I'm smiling a lot, which is unusual for me, is because I'm still on a bit of a high from yesterday. It really was a fantastic event. We've had some other really incredible events, and the Deputy Premier is here and Minister of Agriculture. I want to commend him and his team for a wonderful two-day agricultural fair. I think it went very well. I want to also thank him and his team for their ongoing presence and the perseverance and effort in the context of agriculture. We keep talking about feeding ourselves, we keep talking about food security, and I believe that the Honourable Deputy Premier has led with distinction that particular ministry, and he and his prominent secretary and the entire team ought to be commended for what I'm told is a fantastic two-day event. I would also commend Minister Brantley Williams, Junior Minister in the Ministry of Health and Gender, and she, of course, would have spearheaded with her team the whole celebration of women that is ongoing. And we ought to celebrate our women every day, but they have selected a month of activities, and they piggybacked on the agricultural fair for one of the activities, which was a concert that they had there with performing reggae artist Etana. And I was there for some period of it, and by all accounts it was a tremendous success, and I want to congratulate them. And I feel very privileged in standing here, and I hope I don't get into any trouble. I'm told that the motive, what people were saying, was I am woman, and I believe I can say that. All of us come from women. We can say that I am woman. We are women, and I feel particularly pleased to say so, and particularly bold to say so, because at a gala ceremony where they celebrated 20 women, I was given an award as the only male among 20 women. And I felt very, very, very pleased, very surprised, but also very pleased that the Ministry of Gender Affairs sought to give me this award for my own efforts in relation to the promotion of women. Women, I believe, are doing well in Nevis. Can they do better? Absolutely. But they are doing well. And one of the statistics that I think suggests that women are doing well is the fact that of all the schools in Nevis, I'm told there's some 14 or thereabouts, only one school is headed by a male. All the others are headed by females. And that speaks volumes, in my view, in terms of women, because education has to be the foundation for any successful society. And the fact that we here in Nevis feel comfortable in entrusting virtually all of our education system to the hands of women, I think that speaks volumes to how we have progressed as an island, and may it continue to be so. And so women, I believe, continue to do well, they continue to perform well, and I credit Madam Junior Minister Hazel Brantley Williams for pushing this particular issue and ensuring that our women are celebrated. In fact, at that ceremony, I was particularly impressed to see women being celebrated for what are called non-traditional roles. So we had women, for example, a woman who was a mechanic being celebrated, one who headed a department at the Four Seasons, which is engineering, and which is ordinarily the purview of men. And she was managing a lot of people, including men, And that just demonstrates, I feel, again, that women are doing what they wish to do. Women are emerging and performing in a good way in the development of our beautiful island. The flip side, however, of women doing well is, of course, the continuing danger that we face of violence towards women. And I think that the march and the celebration of women was also seeking to say to our people and remind our people that violence against women, indeed all violence is reprehensible, but violence against women is in a particular category. And we have seen in our federation only this year the death of 3 women, all as a result of domestic violence. And so we want to again sound the alarm and to say to our menfolk that this is unacceptable behavior and we ought to desist from engaging in it. There is no room in our society for abuse of women, abuse of children. There is no room for abuse of anyone. And I want to sound that signal very clearly. The police are here, and I know that the police have been taking this very seriously. I would encourage them to continue to take it seriously. And I would continue to encourage our women not to put up with this behavior, but to seek wherever possible to extricate themselves from abusive situations and indeed to report such matters to the police and to use the support network and the support systems that we have developed both in the Ministry of Gender Affairs and in the Ministry of Social Affairs. And so I want to sound that very clearly, that there is no room in our society for any abuse against women, and that our women folk should be allowed to develop and make their contribution, as they have been doing, for a better Nevis and for a better life for us all. In the context of celebrations, let me put on record the government's appreciation and celebration and congratulations to Delhi Ranks, one of our local soca artists. He placed first run-up in the jumpy category, I'm told, of the Arrow Tribute Soca Competition in Montserrat on Friday the 18th of March. I also want to congratulate Carlin Bowen Tuckett, the son of West Indies cricketer Carl Tuckett and his wife Sonia, for becoming the captain of the Leewards Under-15 cricket team, which will compete in regional Under-15 tournament in Jamaica, which started on Wednesday the 20th of March. Congrats to all who have made that team. I also, since the police are here, I keep referring to them because I think the public will know I'm a great supporter of the police, but I want to congratulate Constable number 626, who's Leon Michael, who has won the Constable of the Year award. I'm told it's the second time in 6 years that this constable has won the award. And I want to celebrate him. And just to say that here again we have an example of the vision of this government. Because this award ceremony is 15 years old this year. And as I sat at the table discussing with the Commission, I realized that there's no equivalent in St. Kitts. So Nevis decided 15 years ago that it would have an award to celebrate the Constable of the Year. 15 years later, it is still going. And this is funded almost entirely by the Nevis Island Administration. And I think that we ought to be given the necessary appreciation for that type of initiative, to see that we have it here, but in St. Kitts there's no equivalent. And I'm told now that St. Kitts would like to introduce something like that to demonstrate, of course, the appreciation to our police officers who go above and beyond in the call of duty to keep us safe. I also, in that context, would like to inform that the CCTV program, which is, of course, part of the crime fighting and part of our response to insecurity, that has been delayed because of the need to construct a command center. And we have been speaking about it for some time, but I've been advised by the Permanent Secretary in the Premier's Ministry that we're finally at a stage where we are about to proceed with that construction. Our Public Works Department will spearhead, and we hope to have that finished in good time, which will house the command center for CCTV and which will allow us to have our part of the national CCTV program. Those of you who are in St. Kitts, as you drive through Frigate Bay, you see them, the cameras now on all the poles, the electricity poles, the utility poles. Similarly will be done in Nevis, and that was delayed because we had, as a NIA, the responsibility to provide the command center. We are just about now to start that, and so we look forward to that being done in a timely fashion so that hopefully in the next several weeks we can report that the CCTV program for island-wide coverage, I think you would know that Charlestown has good coverage already, but island-wide coverage, that we are where we need to be in that regard. I would like to congratulate the Charleston Secondary School, my alma mater, for placing third at the TDC Inter-High Track and Field Championship, which was convened in St. Kitts at the Kim Collins Stadium between the 23rd to 25th of March. I'm told we missed second place by 1 gold medal to Washington Archibald High School. Gingerland Secondary School as well, they put in a spirited performance, and I would like to commend both of our schools who continue to perform well. I just want, if I can take a moment to point out to the public that this year the government invested quite heavily in both of our schools. The students had complained and their teachers had complained that over the years the accommodation for them in St. Kitts to compete in this meet were not adequate. They were forced to be in community centers and the like, and as a consequence they argued that it affected their performance. And so they came and they made a plea, and so I'm pleased to report that the CSS students, a large contingent, were accommodated, I'm told, at the Marriott, and the Gingerland Secondary School students were accommodated across the street at the Royal St. Kitts Hotel, and it came at a cost to you and I, the taxpayers, of $25,000 to accommodate both teams. They say that their performance was even better than last year, and so I suspect that next year they're going to come and say they want to stay at the Park Hyatt because, of course, the better the accommodation, the better the performance. But I will not begrudge them because I think that they did well, and we are very proud of them. Congratulations as well to the 5 Division track and field athletes who have made the National Carifta track and field team, and they will compete in the Carifta Games over the Easter weekend in the Bahamas. The athletes are Leroy Chapman, Marcus Dewberry, Datril Stanley, Timothy Keynes Jr., and Tajari Arthurton. Mr. Kervin Wallace, who of course was Nevis's first Olympian, will also travel with them as the coach. Whilst I'm at the podium, let me also take a moment to congratulate the Honorable Keith Mitchell of Grenada. I think he has won a landslide election since we were last here. And of course, Mr. Gaston, the Honorable Gaston Brown in Antigua, who has equally won a landslide election since we were last year. If I can be allowed a moment of frivolity, I think that Nevis has shown the way in terms of winning landslide elections. I'm happy that they have looked at what we are doing and have decided that they will continue in that vein. But on a serious note, I think that both have demonstrated the necessary leadership in the region, and we are thankful. And I have said elsewhere, and I will say now, that oftentimes we in the Caribbean do not give ourselves enough credit, because we would have seen election after election. Nevis had an election in December. We have had now, St. Martin had an election shortly thereafter. We've had an election in Grenada. We've had an election in Antigua. All of them have gone off without a hitch. No violence, free and fair elections, elections where we have changed governments or retained governments without difficulty. And we now have got to a stage in our region where we take it for granted. But it was not always so. And it's one of the areas I think that oftentimes we have to give ourselves some credit for being able to conduct ourselves in terms of our democracies in a very mature way. I would like to report as well that I would have on the 13th of March met with the representatives from the Chamber of Commerce. It allowed us in a closed-door setting to have a wide-ranging discussion on a number of issues. I think that we have said quite clearly from the government's point of view that we would like to see the private sector do more in terms of taking on more of the responsibility. This government has in the last 2 years, 2.5 years or thereabouts, engaged in quite a massive degree of expenditure in terms of public infrastructure. We have built roads, bridges, we have done a lot, and we think that through the investment in infrastructure, we have now created a better environment, and are asking the private sector now to step up and for them to do their part. And so I was very pleased to have an opportunity to interact with them, to hear their concerns, and to say to them, as I did then, as I do now, that I look forward to regular engagements with members of the private sector and members of the Chamber as their representatives. We would have announced last year an amnesty for work permit holders and those who are here from distant lands. We would have done that, ladies and gentlemen, because it has always been the position of this government that those who have come to Nevis and sought to make Nevis their home are making a valuable contribution. No different to the way that we, when we went to America and the U.S. Virgin Islands and places like Leeds and Birmingham and Manchester in the United Kingdom, made our contribution to the development of those countries. I have said, and I've not been shy about saying over the years, that my own father of blessed memory lived in distant lands for over 40 years. And I know what it's like to get that little check coming to my mother on a monthly period, because that was what sustained us. And I'm not unusual in that regard, because I know many of you sitting down here don't eat plenty out of barrels and boxes that came from St. Martin and Puerto Rico and elsewhere. And that is why I've always been kind, if you will, and always said that we ought as a community to be kind to those who have come from overseas to call Nevis home. They are here, they're making their contribution, and we are not to begrudge them for choosing to be here. We ought to celebrate the fact that they're here. It adds diversity, and it gives us the much needed population that we need in order to advance our island and advance its development. What we have discovered, however, is that some people are here and they're here illegally. Not that in many cases they want to be illegal, but for a variety of circumstances. Work permit fees, I think, are $2,500 per year. We have residency fees at $1,500 per year. Some people don't pay because they're out of a job, whatever the situation may be. And I'm very proud to say that this is the second time, if I can recall, in the past 5 years, that this government has granted an amnesty. And has said that if you are on Nevis and you have found yourself in some difficulty where you have become illegal because of a failure to pay the requisite amounts to the government, then we will provide some type of relief through amnesty. And so what we did was that we announced it last year. It ran for about 4 months, and it ends on the 31st of March. And we announced that what we would do would be to grant some relief to individuals who found themselves in difficulty. So if you had not been paying, we wiped off that debt and allowed you to start anew. And then we said, as an incentive for you to come in and take advantage of the amnesty, that if you came in before the 31st of March, we would reduce the work permit fee from $2,500 to $1,500, and we would reduce the residency fee from $1,500 to $1,000. And I'm very pleased this morning to report that some 974 persons would have come in and availed themselves and benefited from this amnesty in that period. And as I came to work this morning, I met people outside who, as is the Caribbean policy, it seems, it's ingrained in our DNA, that they've come at the 11th hour to take advantage of the 4-month-old amnesty. So I saw some outside lined up and saying they're coming to deal with it because they recognize that it ends on the 31st of March. Just so the members of the press are clear, that after the 31st of March, the prices go back to what they would normally be. And those who owe will have to come and settle in full whatever they owe. But we thought that a 4-month period was, in fact, a generous period of time to give to our non-nationals, to say to them, please come in and regularize your status. We prefer for you to be here and to have a regular status, immigration status, than for you to be existing in our country illegally and somehow to be under the radar. We want people to regularize their status, respect our immigration laws, and this was our way of seeking to invite them to do so and incentivizing them to do so. And some 974 persons. Based on who I saw outside, I think by next time we can report that it will be over 1,000 because people are rushing in the final days. I've spoken to the PS in the Premier's Ministry this morning, and we've actually decided to extend it into next week because, of course, of the holidays. The next several days being holidays here as we celebrate Easter. And so I wanted to just say that as well, but that this will come to an end in the coming week. And so if the individuals out there who have not yet benefited, we ask you please to do so. If this period passes and you do not take advantage of it, you can't blame the government if the immigration officials come looking for you. Because we've given you ample time and ample opportunity and reduced the price and taken a financial hit. Because clearly once we reduce the price, it means that the government is getting less revenue. So that is the extent to which we've gone, to seek to assist you in regularizing your status. And so we ask again that persons do the right thing in that regard. I will end by saying a word about geothermal. Since I was last here, we had the geothermal well drillers, GeoSec, I think they're called. They were here. And we also had the geothermal developers, NREI, and their partners, Thermal Energy Partners. They were all here. And they brought in a company called Geothermics, which is a third-party entity. And Geothermics would have come in order to do what is referred to as the flow tests. I'm very happy to report that the flow tests, I'm told, went extremely well. The flow tests, and please bear with me, but my understanding of the flow tests is that they see the flow of steam and heat to see how consistent it is. And they are very, very pleased. They're very excited with what they found. We're waiting for the final geothermics report, but from preliminary reports, they are saying that we have a commercial grade geothermal resource. In fact, the suggestion that we had was based on the experience. It's in the top 6 in the entire world. They feel that it indicates that Nevis has large reservoirs of geothermal energy, which can provide support for energy generation, electricity generation, not only for the island of Nevis, but for St. Kitts and potentially for export as well. They had initially planned to go to a depth of 4,000 feet, but they've indicated that they stopped at 3,500 feet because there was no need to go deeper. Apparently, they said that at that depth, they were getting temperatures of 492 degrees, and they were concerned that if they went below that depth, the temperature would increase to 500 degrees, which would melt the drill bits. And so they could not go any further, and so they seem quite pleased with what they've seen so far. They've given me some potential dates. I don't like to get into dates on geothermal because I always say, let us under-promise and over-deliver in relation to that particular project. Orion Drilling is the construction contractor and the turbine suppliers, and we look forward certainly to working with them. The connection to Nevlec, they're going to work on that. It's going to be underground, which is also important for us in terms of the stability of the grid, and we certainly look forward to working with them in that regard. I did say it was the last thing, but as I looked at my page here, I realized that I was furnished some information from our Ministry of Finance, just to say that insofar as our period January to March 2018 is concerned, our total recurrent revenue has come out at $41.59 million, and our relevant expenses during that period, I'm told, are at $28.6 million. So for the first 3 months of this government's tenure, it looks as if the flour is more than the water, and that, according to Mr. Doe, that we are well ahead in terms of our revenue collected compared to our expenditure. Less people immediately start to say that that means we can spend some more. Let me just remind you that the first 3 months tend to be the period that we collect most, because of course that's the period when our tourism industry is really doing well. And so I just want to point out that 41.5 million in collections and some 28 million in expenditure gives us a little bit of room, but not much. And so I continue to call on those who are out there to do the right thing, be responsible citizens, as we like to say from Inland Revenue, and ensure that your taxes are paid. Those who are owed property taxes, they owe various taxes, please, to ensure that your taxes are paid. In St. Kitts, I'm advised that the Inland Revenue Department over there will soon be publishing a list of defaulters. They have not yet done so. It will happen imminently, where those who owe the government money and refuse to pay will be publicly named. We have not yet got to that stage in Nevis, but I continue to encourage our taxpayers to do the right thing, because the public continues to demand of us that we build roads and we provide better water supply, we provide greater electricity supply, as the case may be. People complain the hospital needs this. They want facilities such as the Mondo facility. They cost money. And the only way that we can do that, provide security, do all the things that we need to do as a government, is certainly if our taxpayers were to be responsible and were to ensure that they pay their taxes. And so I encourage people to continue to do that, and to say that our Inland Revenue authorities have always been willing to enter into arrangements so as to ensure that it is not too burdensome on our citizenry to do the right thing and to ensure that their taxes are paid. I have said, and the government is of a view, that as part and parcel of our tax enforcement and the overall effort to ensure that our island has the necessary resources, that insofar as government procurement is concerned, the government will do business with those who are up to date and who are in a good position in relation to honoring their obligations. We have found in the past that some people have not had a business license for years, have not paid any taxes for years, and they're still getting government contracts. That, to my mind, doesn't make sense. That the government continues to support people and businesses who are not doing the right thing. And that, to me, puts additional pressure on others who are trying to do the right thing. And so we are saying now that as part of our procurement process, we will be asking questions. Are you up to date in terms of your Social Security? Are you up to date in terms of your business license and other taxes in order for you to move forward? And for me, that is important. I put that again also in the context of concessions. We have found many of our developers, property developers, who are owing large amounts of taxes to the government, but keep coming to the government to say they're going to start another development, and they want tax holiday, and they want all kinds of things, duty-free, VAT-free, vehicles, helicopter, you name it. They come and they want everything from the government, and they say we will provide some jobs. We're saying that is fine, but you also need to honor your obligations. So more and more we're going to try and streamline, and so we can engage people in a positive way about honoring their obligations and doing what is right in the circumstances. I will end there and say to you that I invite any questions and comments that you may have. I will perhaps add this addendum that I would have recently traveled to Africa, more specifically to Morocco. I want the public to know it was a fully funded trip. That is important that you know that, so it didn't come from our taxpayers. But I was invited to be a part of a panel at a forum in Dakhla in the south of Morocco, a forum on renewable energy, when I had an opportunity to speak about renewable energy in our region, sustainability as we try to build resilience to the clear vulnerabilities that we have, and of course the impact of climate change on us all. I was able to speak to geothermal and what we're trying to do in greening Nevis, not politically but in terms of energy. I was able to speak to those matters in Africa. And I can say that there is a tremendous willingness in Africa to invest in the Caribbean. Everywhere I went and everywhere I spoke, they see us in the Caribbean as being a part of the African diaspora. And I think that we have looked north for a long time. We have always looked to Canada and the United States and the United Kingdom for our developmental needs. And it is time, and I've said so as Minister of Foreign Affairs, I say so now as Premier as well, it is time for us also to look south and to look to what is happening in Africa, to look to big economies like Nigeria and South Africa, but also the revolution that we've seen, the economic revolution in places like Rwanda and Morocco. And Africa is getting together. They're more expansionist now in their approach, and I feel that it would be to our benefit to reach out to them. They have banks, large banking conglomerates, which are not reflected in the Caribbean region. Here, you would know that our banking sector is almost 100% dominated by Canadian banks now. And so we have options, and I think that we ought to pursue those options. And that was my message certainly to the various businesses and stakeholders that I met in Africa, that the Caribbean is open for business, and more specifically, St. Kitts and Nevis is open for business, and we hope and encourage them to step up to the plate and to bring some of that investment money to the Caribbean region. So I will end there and invite your questions now from members of the press. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. L.K. Hewlett, WNFM 98.9. Good morning, everyone else at the press conference as well, and those listening via the airwaves. It was indicated in the throne speech that legislation would be brought to basically regularize or cement the tax sharing arrangement between St. Kitts and Nevis, especially with relation to the VAT and now the corporate tax. So how would that, if taxes paid in Nevis stay in Nevis, how would that affect the fiscal sharing apparatus between the NIA and the federal government in terms of grants, funding that Nevis gets their fair share of since the change in administration. Also, can you give, I don't know if this would go to one of the other ministers, can you give an update on the housing scheme? The 10 million that loan from Social Security that was used for housing, has that been exhausted? And I know Deputy Premier Jeffers said that the NIA would be looking to go back to Social Security for additional funds to expand the housing projects. And if you could speak to that. Also, in an interview with WinFM, I think it was just prior to the election, you were asked if you were called upon to serve as Prime Minister, you would have to give it serious consideration. Now, there have been some rumblings in certain quarters that there would be a reimagining of sorts of the leadership of Team Unity going into or possibly coming out of the next election should the coalition be returned to office. Can you comment on that? That's it.
Okay. Your last question first. No, I cannot comment on that. I think I've been in politics long enough to know that the worst thing that we can do is to start to speculate and to start to as I say, count chickens before they're hatched. I think we are focused, and the CCM team is focused on developing Nevis. We are focused on engaging in St. Kitts in a very positive way. I believe that the relationship between both islands, and I've said so before, I say so now again, is the best that it has ever been. And I think that that is our focus at this point. We intend to go to our electorate when the time comes and to say to our electorate that we have a record of achievement, a record of accomplishments that we can run on. We have been tested just 4 months ago, and I believe that it is an indication that the people of Nevis are satisfied with our team. Beyond that, Ms. Hewlett, I'm not prepared to say anything except to say that we remain committed to the unity concept. We remain committed to working with our partners in St. Kitts for better St. Kitts and Nevis, and to extract from that relationship the benefits to which the people of Nevis are entitled. And I use that language on purpose, the benefits to which we are entitled, because I keep telling everyone that we are equal citizens in our country and we are entitled to the fruits of our citizenship. It is not a favor that is being granted to the people of Nevis that we get some monies that come across the Narrows. It is an entitlement because the people that live in Nevis are citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. The man in Butlers is in no different position to the man in Sandy Point. And I want to make that very clear because I think sometimes people get confused when they start to talk about St. Kitts helping Nevis and money coming over. No. The people of Nevis are entitled to their fair share of the national resources. And I want to spend a moment on that because it is not St. Kitts' tax resources that we're talking about. I want to make that clear. We have never gone to St. Kitts and said to the federal government, listen, could you give us some of the VAT receipts from TDC or Hosford's? Could you give us some of your licensing fees that you collect in St. Kitts for whatever reason? What we have gone to St. Kitts and said is that where there are resources that flow from the bargaining of national assets, then the people of Nevis, as citizens of this country, are entitled to their fair share. I like that language, fair share. Not more than our share, but our fair share. And so, where monies have come on a monthly basis from St. Kitts, it's been a negotiated position in relation to passport processing fees that flow from the processing of passports under the Citizenship by Investment Program. The passport that I hold, and I believe the passport that you hold, Ms. Hewlett, says St. Christopher and Nevis. And it isn't right that it says St. Christopher and Nevis, but when it is bargained for money, all that money stays in St. Christopher. So we have said that we are entitled to a fair share of those resources, and that is what has come. So I want to make that very clear. We are not collecting in Nevis any taxpayer money from St. Kitts. We are saying that for things like CBI, Citizenship by Investment Program, the people of Nevis are entitled to their fair share. All of us would have heard about the some $1.4, $1.5 billion that went into a fund called the SIDF in St. Kitts. And that fund, that money came entirely from citizenship by investment. And the people of Nevis got nothing. Whenever there was an opportunity for Nevis to get some pittance, they put a little word attached to it, LOAN, loan. When the people of St. Kitts got 99% of that, they had a different word, GRANT, grant. And we are saying that could not be right. And so I have to credit Team Unity, because I think through Team Unity and through that relationship, as I like to say, that glasnost that has come to St. Kitts and Nevis, we have been able to negotiate better terms and better understanding. And so part of that is that money that comes on a monthly basis from the passport processing fees. Now, in relation to tax issues, which is a separate issue, we raised in our throne speech, because we have an anomaly now where we have companies operating in both St. Kitts and Nevis. I shan't name them, but I think we are all aware that companies operate on both islands. But we have a single filing system for VAT. And so what happens with a lot of companies operating on both islands is that on all of their transactions on both islands, they pay VAT only in St. Kitts. And so the Nevis Island Administration gets no benefit from that activity, even though that activity or some of it happens on the island of Nevis. Similarly, in relation to corporate tax, companies operate on both islands and, I assume, make profits on both islands, but again they pay the entire corporate tax to St. Kitts and to the federal government. And we are saying that what we would want, again, so that the people of St. Kitts appreciate what we are saying, not to get any of the tax generated from economic activity in St. Kitts, but to say that we are of the view that companies know what their branch, what their subsidiary in Nevis is doing in terms of business, and therefore can isolate the profit that is made in Nevis and pay taxes on that profit to the Nevis Island Administration, and pay taxes therefore on their profits generated from the activities in St. Kitts to the federal government. The previous NRP-led administration had tried to negotiate that with the then Douglas-led Labour NRP coalition, and they made some progress because there was an amendment to the tax legislation that was done, but we are told and advised by our people in finance that that amendment was not sufficient, and that some are still opting to file 100% in St. Kitts, leaving, of course, Little Nevis out of the loop. And we are saying to our corporate citizens out there that you cannot come to Nevis, sell your goods and services in Nevis, make profits in Nevis, and then pay all the tax to St. Kitts. Because when your electricity goes off, you're not calling the federal government, you're calling the NIA. When the water situation is bad in Nevis, you're not calling the federal government, you're calling the NIA. When your staff goes to the hospital and there's a difficulty, or you want more security, you're calling on the NIA. And therefore, you have to expect that you must pay your taxes on profits generated and sales generated in Nevis to the NIA. And that is a discussion that we will have. We have not yet been able to sit down with the federal government on that score, but that is something that we feel that we ought to look at. And so I hope I've answered those two questions. In relation to the housing, I have had from our Deputy Premier and Minister of Housing, who's doing an excellent job in that regard. It reports this morning that of that $10 million that we received from Social Security, we were able to secure terms of 3% interest, repayable over 25 years. And we have so far been able to build just over 50 homes, 55 homes I think, and we have spread those homes all across Nevis, the largest concentration being at the new housing development in Maddens. And if you have not seen it yet, I think that you should go and see it. It is really something to behold. What, however, is even more important is that we've been able, because of our negotiation, to offer our nationals an opportunity to buy those homes and to pay an interest rate of only 5%, which I'm told is really the lowest that you can find in St. Kitts and Nevis. And that 5% interest rate to those buying the homes has allowed us to keep the mortgage payments between $900 and $1,250 or thereabouts dollars per month. and so making the homes more affordable to people so that they can buy them. And we are not talking about insignificant homes. I think if you look at the homes, you'll realize that they are beautifully designed, well constructed, and these are homes that we are quite proud of, and our citizenry and those people accessing them are equally proud of their homes. And so it is a great way for first-time homeowners to get a property, and it is a way of partnering with them. And we thank Social Security for clearly continuing its mandate and its social outreach and developing our people. In relation to additional funding, the ministers advised that we are well advanced in our discussion with Social Security for an additional $15 million for more housing for our people. And the anticipation is that this should allow us to build just under 70 additional homes. And so we would hope to do that because the demand for homes is quite high in Nevis, and a lot of young people in particular are anxious to get a piece of the rock, and this is our way in trying to assist them. So I feel that if you have $900, $950 per month, and you can clearly afford to pay that in terms of a mortgage payment, then you ought to have a conversation with the minister and his team at the Nevis Land and Housing Corporation, because we are trying our best to provide that and to work with Social Security. I should add this lastly, that this loan and the whole portfolio is being managed through the credit union. And so it's not as if the housing corporation is managing that itself. It's being done through the credit union, and individuals are going there, monies are being dispersed through the credit union, and that is the way that the loan is being managed. I hope, Ms. Hewlett, I've been able to answer your questions. At least two. Okay. Thank you.
Premier Brantley,
yes.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. I have 5 questions, but I'll ask 4. One.
Identify yourself.
Sorry, Jermaine Abel from SKN Vibes. Yes. The CBI program, during your budget presentation, you indicated that there was a slowdown in economic activities, and you mentioned the Citizenship by Investment program. Specifically, have you been able to speak with the Prime Minister or the federal government, as your part of cabinet, to pinpoint the exact position of the Citizenship by Investment program? Because you're saying that there was a slight slowdown which somewhat had an impact on Nevis's economy last year. But the Prime Minister is basically indicating that the CBI program is in good stead, basically. So have you had discussions in that area? Can we get an update, overall assessment of the damage, especially for us on St. Kitts, in relation to the breach, the sea breach that we had on Nevis several weeks ago? And what is the NIA going to be doing to mitigate against reoccurrence, seeing that the hurricane season is upon us?
I'm sorry, the what breach?
The sea breach, where you had water coming over on the pier.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, sea water. Exactly. Water, in the area of water. Can you just give us an update? On St. Kitts, they're saying that St. Kitts and Nevis has had a dry spell for the last 6 to 8 weeks, basically since the start of January to now. What is the water position on Nevis at this point in time? So, questions for now.
Okay, thank you very much. In relation to the CBI program, it is quite possible that we would have a difference in outcomes between St. Kitts and Nevis. And let me just explain quickly why. Nevis and CBI Nevis is largely real estate. Okay, so in St. Kitts you have real estate plus SIDF initially, and now the Hurricane Fund that ends, and I believe that they're now looking to replace the Hurricane Fund with a Sustainable Development Fund that has just been announced. Those are managed from St. Kitts, not from Nevis, and therefore Nevis doesn't have access to that except through the response I just gave to Ms. Hewlett of some portion coming to Nevis on a monthly basis in terms of revenue. So it is not that we are saying something different. I think that the Prime Minister could be accurate that what is happening in St. Kitts is better than what is happening in Nevis because they have more options available to them for CBI in St. Kitts. In Nevis, our only option is real estate. And that has suffered. I think we see some developments here that are unfinished, some developments that have been stopped by litigation or otherwise. And so we've had our own share of difficulties in Nevis, and that has impacted in terms of how quickly we can proceed and how well we can proceed on the island. We are hopeful that the new approach, in terms of the new pricing schemes that have been announced, seen as it were that they came from the recommendations of developers, that would help in terms of spurring the real estate market again and the real estate development of Nevis again. Sea defenses, what can I tell you? We have these things that happen from time to time. I keep saying that we can prepare, we can heed advice, we can try to build as best as we can, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with Mother Nature, and I don't know that man has ever been able to tame Mother Nature. These sea swells that we had were very unusual. They affected not just St. Kitts and Nevis, but the entire Caribbean, it looks like, because I had visitors from Barbados over the weekend, and they were saying that these sea swells did considerable damage there. I think all of us saw the videos in Montserrat and other places, and it was a very unusual time. Thankfully, the seas have become calm again, and the hope would be that it remains so. You're absolutely correct about hurricane season. I think what we do is what we do every year. We try to prepare, we try to educate our people, we try to ensure that our people understand that these hurricanes are serious business and have to be treated seriously. Can we prevent them? No. All we can do is to take steps to mitigate against the consequences of them. And so that is what we will continue to do and to seek to do. In terms of water, it is accurate that we have had clearly a bit of a drought that has been introduced. I'm very pleased that in the past 2 days we've had good rainfall. I would hope that that continues so that we can get some relief. But in terms of our water supply in Nevis, I think that the last discussion I had with Minister Brand, he indicated that it is not perfect. In fact, it's far from. We recognize that we are operating almost at the limits of where we can operate in terms of supply. Much of the water that we supply here in Nevis comes from wells, and the extraction rate has to be managed. Otherwise, of course, the wells you start to pump salt water. Salt gets into the aquifers. So we have to manage those very carefully. We have very competent people at the water department and at the ministry. I think we're doing a good job, and we have to continue to work with them. Now, what the government decided last year was that having spent over $30 million on water upgrades in terms of storage and distribution through a CDB-funded project, that we will also allocate an additional $10 million to find new water, because the water upgrades dealt only with storage and distribution. Clearly, if you don't have water, it doesn't make sense for you to invest in the storage of it or the distribution of what you don't have. So what we're doing now is investing, and we have contracted BEAD to do some pumps, to do some wells, We're told that they have already done a well in New River that looks very promising, and we are hopeful that we can get that water online and into the system. We feel if BEAD can produce the 3 wells that we've asked them to produce for us and that we intend to pay them to produce, then that will put us in good stead where we will have some surplus water going forward. So in the context of Nevis, I'm quite not happy where we are now, but willing to say to the public that we recognize where we are now and we are investing heavily in taking us to the next level. And so my hope would be that in the ensuing weeks and months, as we have these conversations, we'll be able to tell you exactly where we are in terms of water and to get that surplus that we're looking for.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Premier. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bjorn Hanley, and I'm here representing Nevis Pages, and I have 3 short questions here. Okay, Mr. Premier, in about November 2017, on a radio show, you indicated that within 6 months of a new CCM administration, you would implement the Integrity in Public Life Ordinance. What is the progress now? Would it be implemented by June 2018? That's number 1. Number 2, in 2017, the NIA purchased a brand new Wärtsilä generator all the way from Finland at the cost of millions of dollars. So why are we still having frequent power outages? Is the current problem a generator problem, or is it an operational problem, sir? And the last question is, in 2018 at a budget debate, you said that you would promote a one Nevis. What does that mean? And what steps have you taken to reach out to supporters of the NRP?
Okay, are those the questions?
Yes,
thank you very much. Let me start with your last. Yes, short questions. Let me start with your last question first, Mr. Hanley. One Nevis. One Nevis, for me, suggests the intentions, the aspirations of this government in terms of how we expect to govern. And what one Nevis means is not for me to reach out to NRP supporters. I think this is a government that is here for everybody. But for people to understand that if they have a contribution to make, then that contribution is welcomed regardless of their political affiliation. So if it was you felt that I would be knocking on people's doors and asking, who do you support? The NRP? Well, please come. I have a job for you. That is not what was intended. I wanted to send a clear signal that what we are creating in Nevis is an environment where every Nevisian, in fact every person living in Nevis, can feel comfortable making their contribution. So that people ought not to feel, well, listen, I support the NRP and therefore I cannot approach the government if I have a project or if I have an idea or if I'm looking for a job. But rather that people feel comfortable approaching the government if they have something to offer. In the context of a job, if there's a suitable position, that they feel comfortable applying for that position. In the context of a business venture, that they feel comfortable that they'll be treated with a level of respect like any other investor. That is what we meant. So it's not for me to reach out. It is for me to say to the public that the government is here for everyone. And that was the intentions in that regard. Wärtsilä, as I understand it, we have, of course, just like water, two issues. You have the generation issue, and then you have the distribution issue. So the Wärtsilä investment was to assist us on the generation side. And I don't think it's any secret, because we talked about it for a very long time, that over the years there was very little investment made in generation and generating capacity. So a lot of the generators that we have at the plant are old, obsolete. And so this was an investment, and I think we'd want to credit the Deputy Premier, who was then in charge of NEVLEC, because he pushed hard. I remember him coming to Cabinet and negotiating quite strongly that the Cabinet supports these ventures, and I would want to thank the SIDF as well, that provided some of the financing to allow this Wärtsilä engine to be purchased. But those purchases of engines was an investment in generation. What I'm being told is that some of the difficulties that we've since experienced are difficulties in distribution. So you all heard of this ubiquitous cotton ground feeder that continues to provide difficulties. And that is due to the fact that the entire system is due an upgrade. And that is something that we now need to work on, because what we've been doing over the years, and it's just over perhaps the last 20, 30 years, is stopgap fixes. So the Wärtsilä engine has assisted us tremendously in meeting our generation needs. What we now need to do as well is to upgrade the distribution network to ensure that we are not having the types of problems that we've been having in the past. Sometimes power gets knocked out in Nevis for something that some may view as simple, but something where an electricity pole is knocked out by an errant driver. Truck comes on the road, knocks out a pole, the power goes down. And that has to do with the distribution and maybe the absence of redundancies in the distribution network. So these are things that we have to look at. I believe that NEVLEC is very aware. I've been having close meetings with them, including the new chairman there, and I hope that we can find the resources to do what is necessary to do that overall upgrade. So I'm trying to say, I don't know if I'm being successful in saying that there are two different issues, because you have a generation issue, that's what the purchase of engines is designed to solve, and then you have a distribution issue, which is the lines that we have to work on to ensure that people can get power to their homes. Integrity in public life, I'm happy you raised it. I'm very pleased to say, and I want to commit that we will operationalize this legislation long before June. So I'm going to be in a position where this 6 months, I don't think we'll need 6 months. And I just would like to advise that I have already written under the legislation. It requires a commission, an integrity commission, comprised of 3 persons, a chair, appointed by the Deputy Governor General in her own deliberate judgment, but the chair must be a retired judge or a lawyer of 15 years standing at the bar. And then 2 other members, one appointed on the advice of the Premier and the other appointed on the advice of the Leader of the Opposition. As the elections went in December of last year, we do not have a Leader of the Opposition, but we do have a member of the Opposition in the person of the Honourable Joseph Parry. And I can confirm that I have written to the Honourable Joseph Parry inviting him to nominate his member to the Electoral Commission. And that has been done. So we are hopeful that he will nominate Integrity Commission. Forgive me. The Integrity Commission. So I have already written to the Honourable Joseph Parry, inviting him to nominate his member to the Integrity Commission. We will also write to indicate our member, and then the chair would be a matter for the Deputy Gigi in her own deliberate judgment. But I would hope that very early next month we can conclude that process, and then the only other thing would be a discussion about the budget for that commission to do its work. We also propose in the coming month to have some educational and awareness sessions, because the Integrity in Public Life legislation is intrusive. It impacts public servants at the highest levels. It impacts the ministers and the members of Parliament, and so we hope to have some discussions on that. So I believe that by the next time we have this conversation, Mr. Hanley, I hope I can tell you that that was a commitment that we made and a commitment that we've kept.
Good morning. Monique Washington, St. Kitts Nevis Observer newspaper. I just have 2 questions. Sometime last week and the week before, over in the Bricklin Butlers area had some major water problems. It was basically blamed on a pump. Was it a NIA pump or a bead pump? And since, has the problem been resolved? And also, can you please give an update on the construction of the new wing at the hospital?
Thank you very much. I'm not sure who the pump belongs to. I would think it was a bead pump. I'm being given the nod from the minister. I'm not sure who the pump belongs to. They're suggesting it's a bead pump, but whoever it belongs to, at the end of the day, I think what is relevant is people getting the water that they're entitled to. What the explanation we've had from our water authorities in a recent meeting with Mr. Roger Hanley, who's the manager there, and the minister, is that that dry spell that we've had, there has been some difficulty. It has impacted negatively. And also the fact that we have reached a point where we don't want to be pumping, as I said, too much from our aquifers for fear that the salt water will get saline penetration coming in. So we've had, in relation to some of the pumps, to cut the level at which we are pumping water from them. In relation to some of the wells, to cut the level at which we're pumping water from them. That has an impact. I believe on that side of the island, on one particular well, I think he has suggested we've lost as much as 120 gallons per minute from that well, and so that has impacted our ability to provide water in that area, bearing in mind that the Four Seasons also gets its water from that general distribution network in that area. What we've done and what we are going to continue to do are 2 things. One, it's going to be some load shedding, in the sense that late at nights we're going to shut off the supply so that we can build up, so that when people get up in the mornings, they have water to do what they need to do, to get ready for work, get the children to school, etc. So I believe currently, Mr. Brand, it's from midnight, 10 p.m. until 4 a.m., that period. And hopefully people are sleeping and not using water. No, it's just in that general area where most of the difficulty is being experienced. So we're talking about 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. When we hope that the pumps will be working, little if any consumption, and so that will build up the supply so that when people get up in the morning they have the necessary water. The second thing we'll be doing is, of course, relaunching and reiterating our education campaign to encourage people to conserve water, and that we are in an environment where perhaps we can't go and water the lawns and do all the things that we do with water sometimes. I'm hopeful with water rates going up as of the 2nd of April, that will also encourage people to conserve water, since they're paying more for it now. And it's not as cheap as it used to be, that people would also conserve water in that regard. Has the problem been completely solved? No. But we are working on solving it, and we are hopeful that we can get some additional rainfall which assists us in solving it. And just, again, 2 days ago, we had the necessary conversation where we're inviting BEAD to speed up what they're doing in terms of finding new water. The well at New River looks very promising. If we can get that into the system, then it will alleviate the problems in a tremendous way.
The second question?
What was your second question?
Update on the construction.
Yes, forgive me. Yes, I, in anticipation of coming here and knowing that somebody would ask about the hospital, I did get an email from the permanent secretary. We are hopeful that this hospital project will get going shortly. Everything that we need for this project is in place, and it's just a question of getting it started. We had a bit of a setback because we had, I think, contracted Mr. Brand when he was in a different stage in his life. Contracted him to do the project management. Now that he is a minister and the good people of St. Paul's have sent him to do different work, we have had to start the search again to get a project manager. I'm told that search has now been completed, and that has been part of the hold-up, because we want a project that size has to have a project manager. In addition to that, the quantities, we're having an issue in terms of getting the quantities, so we had to engage a quantity surveyor. For a very large project such as that took some time as well. I'm told that is expected by next week, the final quantities. And other than that, everything else is in place. The contracts are in place, the contractors are in place, the steel frame is there, the financing is in place. It's just a question of getting it started. And unless you ask, I think a similar question will come in relation to the pier at Wally. I've had conversations with the Deputy Premier who is charged with that project. And again, we are simply waiting on the contractors. Everything that we need to do is in place, and we hope that they'll be here shortly to do that project. These two projects are two very important projects for the island. I think in terms of transportation, particularly between St. Kitts and Nevis, the pier at Wally is critical. And in terms of our healthcare, obviously, this what looks like a $20 million investment in the advancement of healthcare at our hospital will be very significant for us. So the permanent secretary is here. She knows how strongly I feel about it. I think the junior minister of health knows how strongly I feel about it. And I think my message to her is to get it done. So we really do need to move forward because everything else is in place. And the two hold-ups that we had most recently, because prior to that we lost a lot of time because there was some cabling issues. And apparently some very sophisticated cable that we couldn't find anywhere. We had to get from the UK. Had to be shipped at great cost to us. Eventually that was done, but that delayed us for months. And then now we have this issue of Mr. Brand going on to other things. And so we had to start the search again to get a new project manager.
Okay, Hewlett, Twin FM once again. Can you say, if at all, there is expected to be any kind of effect on the agriculture sector and the tourism sector, especially hotels, with the increase in the water rates? And also, the upgrade to the hospital, does that include a dialysis center? And if not, could you give us an update as to where you are at? I know there was one machine here umpteen years ago. I don't know if that's still functional, kind of thing.
Thank you, Ms. Hewlett. Increase in water rates, we don't think it ought to have a negative impact. And as I said the last time I was here, and as I said during the budget debates, water rates have not been changed in Nevis in 32 years. And if any of you can point to anything that has remained the same in 32 years, I will commend you. We have not had a water increase in 32 years. And the truth is that the rate that we're paying for water has been 10 EC dollars for 1,000 gallons of water. I like to use this example because you go to any bar and this is 5 EC dollars. $5. And we buy it, we drink it, we have no problem with it. 5 EC dollars. This bottle has I have no idea, 650 milliliters. But we pay 5 EC dollars for this. The 30% increase in water means that on 1,000 gallons, you're going to pay an extra 3 EC dollars. So I don't see in good conscience how that should have or could have a negative impact either on agriculture or in terms of our hotel industry. The government has not simply gone out and asked people to pay more for water. We've invested over $30 million in water upgrades. And the increase, let us remember, was part and parcel of the funding agreement with the CDB. When the CDB provided the funding, the CDB asked for the rate increase, and the rate increase was agreed by the then administration. It wasn't implemented. But now that the CDB project is coming to a close, we have to find a way to fund the repayment of this massive $30+ million loan. And notice I say we haven't stopped there, because we're also talking about investing another $10 million in finding new water. So it's not a situation, I want the public to understand, that we're asking the public to pay more and we're not giving them more. In my view, we're investing very heavily, and this is part and parcel of our ability to try and repay. In terms of dialysis, it is our intention that dialysis at some point will be a part of what we do at the Alexandra Hospital. And yes, I believe the new wing does make provision for that. But in the interim, we continue to provide assistance to patients who are being dialyzed on zinc kits at the Josephine France Hospital, where they have both peritoneal and hemodialysis available to nationals of St. Kitts and Nevis. Dialysis, as we have always said, is incredibly expensive. In fact, even now in St. Kitts, it's, I believe, $800 per treatment, where some people need 2 and sometimes 3 treatments per week. And so one could just do the math to understand how costly it is. The government has always said that it is a process that requires proper consideration, and we ought not to have any knee-jerk or emotional reaction to it. There's been a lot of noise being made out there in the public square about dialysis. We have not been moved by that, because at the end of the day we have to do what is prudent and sensible and something that is sustainable. In the meantime, we're working with Taiwan for a 3-year process where we're training personnel. I believe that we have had so far 2 of our nurses and 1 of our doctors who has gone to Taiwan. And the Taiwanese have actually come here and offered training to a wider group of people. And we are broadening the discussion, not just about dialysis, because dialysis is at the end stage. Dialysis is when you already have renal failure. We are broadening discussion through our public health and our health promotion unit to encourage our people to do the things that would avoid them ever having the need for dialysis. So take care of yourselves, do the exercise, eat properly, try to avoid the triggers for kidney failure, which are, of course, diabetes and hypertension. Moderate consumption of alcohol, and we continue to encourage our people to practice safe sex. Not that that has anything to do with dialysis, but it's part and parcel of our overall message to our public, and the health promotion unit has been out there and very active in trying to encourage our people. I want to again credit the Renal Society, because I think they've done an excellent job in keeping the awareness of kidneys and the functioning of kidneys and kidney health in the forefront of all that we do. So the truth is that we hope at some point, and it is part of the plan for the extension, but it is not to suggest that people who need that service are being deprived of it, because it's been made available at JNF in St. Kitts, and where necessary, the government of Nevis has provided assistance to those who require that service there. Anything further? Sure.
Good morning, Minister Brantley, and good morning to the general public. Jarvis Baum on radio. We just have 3 questions, sir. The first one is, what is the status of the recreational park at Pinnes? And the second thing, can you give us an update or even plans regarding the ETW park? Because government last year spoke of a $15 million investment at that park. And the last one is basically, as we all know, regarding the video at the Charlestown Secondary School. Now, what measures does the NIA plan to put in place to perhaps mitigate against this, or can you give us an update as well? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. The recreation park at Pinnis, we feel that we have some good favorable winds blowing now in relation to that. I think that we've had some delays, as you know, but we've recently had meetings, very fruitful meetings, I'm told, by the Deputy Premier with the International Development Agency for Taiwan, the ICDF. The director was here, and we would have met, and we are inviting them to participate with us on finalizing that park. And so the park is still very much on our agenda, and we hope to have movement on that very, very shortly. The ETW park, that is still in the planning stages. I want to remind us that when governments talk about projects that we intend to do, but we do have a 5-year term, and I don't anticipate that we'll be able to do all the projects in the first few months of that 5-year term. And so the ETW park is a project that we want to do, a project that we've committed to doing, to have a dedicated venue for cricket. But that project, and Mr. Michael Perkins, who works with the NIA in a consultative position on engineering and other developmental matters, he has reported to us that there is some land reclamation that needs to happen, some land acquisition, not reclamation, I'm sorry, land acquisition that needs to happen. So we're negotiating with neighboring landowners to see what we can do in that regard. So the project is still very much on the go. We have a basic design of the facility. We're trying to ensure clearly that it meets international standards in terms of boundary setbacks, etc. So we are working on that. So we have not abandoned it at all. It is part of what we need to do. But at this juncture, I don't have the benefit of the detailed plans yet in terms of costing and contractors and that, but it's something that we wish to do. In relation to the video at Charleston Secondary School, which went viral and I think embarrassed all of us, we continue to appeal to children and parents. Just as I said earlier that violence against women is unacceptable, I think violence of any kind is unacceptable. And that we have to inculcate in our children in particular, and our people more generally, that the way to resolve disputes is not through violence. And of course, seeing two boys batter a girl, especially that they appeared physically to be much bigger than that girl, I feel that shocked and nauseated all of us. I've had the privilege of speaking to both sets of parents, the girls and the two brothers, and I am satisfied in my own mind that this is behavior that is not condoned by those parents, nor encouraged by those parents. In fact, if I can be so bold, I would say that those parents appeared incredibly embarrassed by the activities of their children in school. You know what they say colloquially, we can do the best that we can, but at the end of the day, children and everybody else has a mind of their own. And a lot of times I think we jump to conclusions that the people come from a bad home if they do bad things. It may not always be the case. And issues of anger and anger management, sometimes we have to expose people to the necessary training, the necessary counseling to get that done. I'm advised that counseling has been made available. I'm advised that the police are engaged with this matter. And obviously I can't comment on that aspect of things, but the police have, I'm told, been prepared to lay charges in relation to it. In the interim, though, we have a wider problem, and perhaps the issue of these 3 young children in our school system exposes a wider issue within our schools and within our broader society of how we deal with disputes, how we deal with dispute resolution, how we can encourage each other to walk away. In fact, I saw a viral video from Barbados where a young girl was being bullied and another girl was in her face and hitting her, and she walked away. And she had gotten tremendous commendation. But one of the things that her father said was that she had been enrolled in counseling programs. So as if she had developed the coping mechanisms and the understanding that this is how you deal with these types of confrontations. And she got widespread acclaim for walking away in the face of someone who clearly was trying to bully her and trying to encourage some kind of fight. So we have to encourage, they say here, the old people say, one hand can't clap, equally one hand can't fight. And sometimes if somebody comes and tries to start something, the answer is to walk away, report it to the authorities, and have it dealt with in the appropriate way, rather than allowing the type of conflagration that we saw at the CSS campus. Generally speaking, and I'm not here to sugarcoat it, we have an issue. We have been confronted with it now for some time. We've been talking about it in the cabinet in terms of the behavior generally. I have referred to it in my own public discussions as a coarsening of our public discourse and a coarsening of our interactions in public. And talking to teachers, things like bad words, as we call them locally, curse words, they say it's common parlance now among our children in school. Smoking of marijuana, a lot of them are engaging it in the schools. And this government has been forced to respond by, for example, putting CCTV coverage at both CSS and GSS at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars. That money could have been used to buy computers, outfit computer labs, provide real assistance in terms of scholarships. Instead of that, we are forced to install security cameras as if we were at a jail or some other institution of that kind. And that again reminds us all that the parents have a responsibility to train their children in the right way. The parents have a responsibility that when the teachers at school are forced to engage with the children and forced to discipline their children, that they do not take up themselves and go up to the school and start to abuse the teachers. Because that has been happening. That when the principal has and is forced to exercise some discipline in relation to children, parents go up to the schools and sometimes carry members of the family to try and threaten the teachers and threaten the principal. That is not acceptable. I have had reports where a parent has gone and abused the principal in front of the child. So if a young child at 14 who did something wrong gets that type of support from the parents who come there and not only abuse the principal but does so in the presence of that child, what do you think is likely to happen? And so all of us have a responsibility. The parents cannot shirk their responsibility because it is not the responsibility of the teachers at school to parent their children. They must do what is necessary, instill in their children the necessary values of respect, the necessary values of not engaging in the type of fights and activities that we see, the necessary values in saying, listen, leave the weed smoking and all of that. Leave that alone and focus on what you're in school for, which is hopefully to learn the lessons that are being taught to you. Parents need to do their job. And when something goes wrong, everybody comes to the government. I have 2 children. I don't know that I have any more. And the members here have their own children. So the government can do its part and has to do its part. But at the end of the day, the government cannot parent your children for you. That is your responsibility. And if you decide to go out and get them, you must understand that you have a responsibility to them. And you must take that responsibility seriously and provide the necessary love and support for your children, that they do not go out there and engage in illicit, antisocial, and in many cases, criminal behavior. And we have to start to hold the parents accountable for what it is their children are doing. Because oftentimes this comes from a lack of proper parenting. But I go back to say that children as well sometimes have their own minds. And whether through peer pressure or otherwise, they engage in activities that they ought not to engage in. And so they themselves must recognize that they too have a responsibility. And we have counseling, we have career guidance officers. We have all of those now being made available in the school system to provide the necessary support for our children. So it's going to take a massive effort from all of us. Those who have children and those who don't have children, because those who don't have children are also nevertheless members of the community and members of the society. And all of us will have to do our part to ensure that we get the kind of Nevis and the kind of country generally that we want. So all of us are saddened by this tragic occurrence at the school. We hope that this does not reoccur. And the truth be told, that we only know about it because it was recorded. And I have said so before. But one of the tragedies of that video wasn't even so much the actual altercation between these 2 boys and a girl. It was the fact that you had, by my tally, Nearly 50 students standing around laughing, jeering. Not one of them stepped forward to say, let us part the fight. So it begs the question of the malaise in the wider community, that we could see that happening, and our response is to laugh and jeer and encourage and egg on, rather than saying this is wrong. And I have called shame on those boys up at CSS. I think all of them should be ashamed of themselves. That they'll see two boys beating up a young girl and none of them intervene to stop it. So we all need to take our responsibility seriously. And it's personal responsibility. It's also community and collective responsibility for what happens in our island. Mr. Hanley, I think you said you had another question.
You mentioned earlier that you'll be writing a letter to the leader of the opposition. But in the 2018 budget debate, you said that there would be an office for the leader of the opposition. Can you give us an address for that office? And if there's no address, can you confirm a specific timeline in which that office will be implemented? And then I would suggest that the office be placed somewhere in this building, or temporary until the new Treasury building is built, and then probably the office can be transferred down there. Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, I'm as always grateful for your suggestion, but just to say that the office has been identified. It will be in the Solomon Arcade, Mr. Doe, in the Solomon Arcade, which is in the heart of Charlestown. I'm told it should be available from the 9th of April. That office should be available to the member of the opposition, since it appears that there is no constitutional basis to appoint a leader of the opposition. And just to correct, you said that I said I will write to the leader of the opposition. I want to make the point that I have written to the member of the opposition, the Honorable Joseph Parry, to invite him to nominate someone to the Integrity Commission. I want to just be clear. That was my answer to the initial question that you posed about the integrity in public life legislation and operationalizing it. So the office for the opposition will be at the Solomon Arcade, and the keys we are hoping to be handed over by the 9th of April. It will be a fully furnished office, and I'm sure, Mr. Hanley, if you would wish, you could spend some time there. And the hope would be that it will be in good order. Any other questions? Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to just thank all of you for coming. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being part of this very important exercise. As I committed to doing this once a month, we hope that we will continue to live up to those commitments that we have made as we continue to promote greater transparency and better governance for the island of Nevis. I thank all the members of the press who came, who asked questions. I thank my cabinet colleagues and others who are here, the permanent secretaries, and others who would have taken some time out of their busy schedules to be here with us. And I look forward to the next encounter when I shall propose to update you and take your questions as well. Thank you. Thank you, members of the security forces as well. And I hope that I see Mr. Barrett in the back, that he looks a little tired. I'm sure he's been celebrating the Charlestown Primary School victory. May those who have won continue to celebrate. And may those who did not win continue to celebrate the fact that they participated and they did so with the best sportsmanship. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day and a blessed Easter weekend. I trust that all of you will do the necessaries. Go to the flats. I think there's kite flying. I gather there's some cricket being played around. And I'm sure the beaches, as usual, are going to be filled with people. And those of you who want to, remember not to eat any meat, and to eat lots of conky and things of that nature as we reconnect with our cultural heritage here for the Easter season. Thank you, and God bless all of you. Thank you.
Television.